Do you want to guess which car broke down on me literally a week after I got it fixed again? Yep, you're right. It was the C55. So the other day, I went out to have a nice breakfast with some friends, went back to the car and tried to turn it on, and this is all that happened. So clearly there was something wrong with the car. I wasn't going to keep trying to crank it over because I didn't want to burn out the starter motor. So immediately I always carry my little OBD reader with me, and of course scanned it, even though there were no check engine lights on the dash. Scanned it and there was a code for P0335, which is a crankshaft position sensor, circuit A, you know, yada yada. So essentially the crankshaft position sensor went bad on this car. It is a known issue on the M113, M113 compressor drivetrains. So that is going to be the topic of today's video. Is I'm going to be replacing this crankshaft position sensor and trying to show you guys the best way to go about doing it. It's not the hardest job, but it's really just hard to get to. There's not going to be a lot of great filming angles to like show you where it is. I'll do my best, but I'm just going to kind of document my process of replacing this because there are some videos out there for other Mercedes, but nothing for the C55 in particular. So I'm going to go ahead and start replacing this sensor and kind of fill you guys in along the way. The other thing I also wanted to note is that when the crankshaft position sensor goes bad, there's really not many warning symptoms. There's a few subtle ones, such as you know, the transmission is shifting a little bit harder, a little bit, you know, sputtering on start, like it doesn't start up right away. But for the most part, this is a real sneaky problem that'll just creep up on you real quick and leave you stranded, which was what happened to me. Like I said, I was at breakfast, tried to start the car, and I was stuck in a parking lot, had to get the car towed home so I could fix it here. And the other thing is sometimes you'll get lucky. The car will start back up when it's cold. Just one of those things, when the sensor is cold, it reads still. But when the car gets warm, it might die on you while you're driving it. So I didn't take any chances. I have AAA, so I got free towing. But I just wanted to let you guys know of the fact that there's not many warning symptoms with this position sensor going bad. I might have noticed a little bit of hard shifting with the transmission when the car started up and was cold, but other than that, nothing too abnormal before this sensor went bad. So the day it went bad, I immediately went to the parts store, got myself a replacement sensor. I learned my lesson from the whole alternator deal, and only got a Bosch OEM, so you can see Bosch here. And this is literally the $30 sensor that caused all of my heartache the other day with the car getting stranded. And this is indeed a Bosch OEM made in Germany part, so it is a quality sensor. So you can see here it's a really simple part. You know, there's not a whole lot to it. You got the sensor on this end, one bolt, which is an E8 you know, torque bolt, and then you got your, obviously, your electrical clip here. And the tricky thing with replacing that is getting to it and you know, getting your sockets lined up correctly with your series of extensions and swivel heads and stuff like that. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna go bring you guys over to the engine bay and show you guys where this sensor is located. So one thing I wanted to do, make sure I did in this video that a lot of other YouTube videos didn't do when I was looking up how to replace this, was show you exactly where in the engine bay the sensor is located. They kind of just cut to the feed where they were already over there. So obviously I'll show you guys walking over to the car. I already have the intake and the snorkel and the whole front cover off sitting on the Corvette over here. So what you're going to do is just take those off. Just pops off really easily. So then obviously you're looking at the engine here on the driver's side. When you're facing the car to the right, the sensor is going to be located down behind the valve cover, down, you know, here, and it's on the back side of the engine above the transmission bell housing. Now, like I said earlier, I'm not going to most likely be able to show you guys on camera the sensor in its position. So one thing that I did while looking up how to fix this was I just Googled some pictures of the M113 or similar engine, because a lot of Mercedes engines, even though this is the AMG M113 V8, all the V6s, they're kind of similar in how they're built. So the crankshaft position sensor is in the similar location. So I found a picture online of the engine out of the car looking from behind with the flywheel exposed and everything, and it shows you exactly where the crankshaft position sensor is located. And if you're looking here, the crankshaft position sensor, if you think of a clock, is about at the 2 o'clock mark. So it's going to be somewhere down here. And so what a lot of people recommend is there's a little zip tie right here that you can cut off and move this wiring harness a little bit. And some people will go to the extreme of removing the MAF, and so disconnecting the MAF sensor and removing this little elbow piece here, because that helps you get your left hand down on this side. I'm going to try and do it without having to do that. Just, you know, the less parts I have to take off, the better. But I might have to do that later on. So this job is going to be kind of a lot of just me figuring it out, and I'll fill you guys in along the way. There's not a lot of good filming to do of me replacing the sensor. It's just trying to get a socket down in there and trying to get this thing replaced. So I'll document it as I go along and keep you guys updated on the tips and tricks that help me the most replacing this sensor, because like I said, in reality it's really simple. One bolt, unclip the connector, take the sensor out, and then put the new one in, but it's just getting to it is the tough part. And just for safety measures, I don't know if this would affect anything or not, but just as a precaution, I am going to disconnect the battery, simply because we're dealing with sensors, electrical, you know, I don't want the car to freak out, you know, just being extra precautious. It's 2 bolts, so might as well just take that precaution. Other thing real quick, so basically the tools you'll need are a basic socket wrench. You're going to need an E8 female Torx socket. That's the size of the bolt on the back of the crankshaft position sensor. You'll need a series of extensions. So I just got these from Harbor Freight. They're wobble extensions, so they allow for a little bit of movement. And then of course, this is another helpful thing to have, is a universal joint set, a swivel set, you know, so that you can maneuver your socket in this cramped area very tightly. And that's what a lot of other people that have done this job on YouTube and forums have noted, that you just need a good set of extensions, swivels, you know, universal joint, whatever you want to call it, and it should help get the job done a lot better. Alright, ladies and gents, so I got the old sensor out, so I'll go over there in a second, but I want to show you guys kind of my methodology. A little bit unconventional, but hey, I got the job done. I got that sensor out in probably, you know, 20-30 minutes worth of trying. So basically what I did was, you can see here, I took part of the MAF off. So there's this little clip that holds the MAF, the top part of the MAF on, and you just use a screwdriver and pop that off, so then it expands open and you can remove the top part of the MAF off. Now a lot of people go ahead and take this off, but I didn't want to. I was having a little issue with the clips on the MAF sensor, so I didn't want to mess with that and potentially break that. So what I did was I kind of just pulled this out and put it to the side, and that gave me just enough room to stick my hand down this way. Now the sensor is literally right down here, just below the head on the engine here. So you got valve cover, and then the head goes a little bit farther down, and the sensor is sitting kind of at an angle like this. And once you get your hand down there, this job is pretty much all by feel. So I put my hand down this way, and then with my left hand, and then my right hand I came down from this side behind here by this heat shield, used this series of extensions here. So I had like a 3-inch extension here, a swivel, probably like a 4 or 5-inch extension here, and then like a 1 or 2-inch extension here with my E8. And then not to mention, these are all wobble extensions, so these have a little bit of play in of themselves. So that was what I used to get to the sensor. I broke it loose with the socket attached, and then I just spun this by hand to get the bolt out. And another thing that I didn't mention earlier that would be helpful is get yourself a good magnetic pickup tool, just in case that bolt falls down, you know, because you don't want to have to, you know, deal with that on top of trying to get the sensor replaced. Have a good magnetic pickup tool in case the bolt falls. If it falls, it should fall to the ground. There's not much below blocking it, maybe the under tray, but that's just a precaution to have just in case. So let me take you over to the sensor now and show you the sensor. So sorry, I'm trying not to cast a shadow here with the camera and my headlamp, but So this is the old sensor. You know, doesn't look broken, but it has to do with internally there. And here's the new one. And of course, what you always want to do, put these side by side, compare them, compare the lengths. These sensors are like pre-gapped, so you don't have to worry about, like, you know, spark plugs, like how you have to gap them, but these are pre-gapped, so, you know, it just slides right in, bolts up. Another thing, make sure the connectors are the same. So when you look at the connector port, so you can see there's like a tab on the one tab on the right, two on the left, with the two prongs in the middle. And then same deal with this guy here. And then of course the bolt, same bolt, you know, pattern, size, everything. So that's good to see. We got the same sensor. I checked the part number too. It's gonna be hard to see on camera, but you can see the Bosch part number on here. That lines up. So now let's go ahead and I'll do this in reverse and put this new sensor in. Alrighty, so I got the new sensor back in. Literally, just the key is just using your left hand, holding the sensor in your left hand, and gumming from above where the map sensor is, and going down and below and kind of, you know, plunking it in that way, and maybe trying to sneak your right hand in here. It's a really tight fit right here by this heat shield, so you can maybe, depending on how big your hands are, get your hand in there and kind of guide it. But I just kind of used my left hand to hold the sensor and also feel for the hole to put it in. And then after that, to get the sensor aligned with the bolt hole, since it's a single bolt hole, I just used a small screwdriver here to help me line up the hole, you know, on the sensor with the bolt hole in the housing of the engine, or I don't know if it's transmission or engine housing, the engine casing. So now that that's all lined up, I'm going to use my series of extensions again. And what other people had recommended doing was use a little bit of like blue painter's tape or something to hold your E8 bolt into the socket, and then that way it won't fall out as you're trying to feel for the hole to put it through. And then once you get it tight enough, the blue tape will just break loose, and you can get your socket extensions out of there. So that's what I'm going to do next, is get the bolt here. This is what it looks like. It's just a single little E8 bolt. And then I'm going to tape it to the socket extension and hopefully get this thing tighten down in there, and then you plug it back in and reassemble. So this is what I kind of mean by using some blue tape to hold it in there. So the blue tape is just very loosely holding that bolt in. It basically just won't let it fall out, but the minute you apply some torque to it, it'll break loose from that tape, and you can pull the socket extension out of there. So this is a key thing to do to make sure you don't lose the bolt while you're trying to put this guy back in. But of course, make sure you align the sensor first so that you're not trying to feed a bolt into, you know, dead space. It's actually lined up, and that'll save you some heartache there. And remember, use that small screwdriver to line up the sensor. So now I'm going to go ahead, put this guy in, and hopefully we can get this thing back and running soon. The sensor back in. Took me about an hour and 15 minutes to this point, from beginning of the video to now. I haven't fully finished yet, like assembling the car, but just thought I'd take a minute here and kind of explain some of the process. So like I said earlier, go in above the MAP sensor or by the MAP sensor. Either take, just move this guy out of the way. Some people recommended taking this little 90-degree elbow out too. I didn't have to do that. My hands fit. I have fairly large hands, but they're, slim. So just depending on your hand size, you might have to take more or less off. But go in this way, and 90% of this job is by feel. You can't hardly see anything that you're doing. Maybe 10%, you can kind of see it, and I tried showing it on camera, but it just doesn't come across. There's a zip tie again on this little wiring bundle here. If you cut that off, you can push this out of the way, and this is the wiring bundle that the crank position sensor goes to, so you'll see a wire feeding down that way, and just about, maybe 5 inches below where my finger is here, that's where the crank position sensor is. You can push this out of the way and use your flashlight to see that. And seeing it from that angle with the plug off helped to kind of get an idea of aligning it, because I had a little bit of an issue aligning the bolt hole with the hole on the back of the engine. It is going into part of the engine. It's not the transmission. It's the very back flange before it bolts up to the transmission. So seeing it from this angle just a little bit helps to align the bolt. But then, again, use your left hand from this side to feed the sensor in, and then come in from the right side with your socket extension series, and you can kind of use your left hand to feed the socket onto the head of the bolt and tighten it up, because that really helped. And use that screwdriver, the small screwdriver, to make sure that the hole is lined up. Again, because the screwdriver is small, it's not going to fully fill up the whole thing, but at least you'll get an idea of how close you are to the hole on the sensor being lined up to the hole on the engine. Because the way the sensor is oriented in the car is like this. So you're going to be kind of coming in from this angle, so that, again, it's at about a 2 o'clock, so it's angled slightly up a little bit, and the bolt is below the plug. So you're going to be coming in from below to hit this bolt to get it out, and then again, when you put the sensor back in, this plug is kind of like a D shape, and the flat side is going to be towards the driving compartment, and the round side is towards the front of the car. So that's how you're going to align your plug once you get it back in. And you'll feel the sensor fully sit into the hole, like it won't want to go in any farther, and then obviously when you tighten the bolt down, it'll cinch it down just enough to how it needs to be in there. So now what I'm going to do is just reassemble the top part of the engine here, put the MAF back on, put the intake on, reattach the battery, and then we'll start it up, clear the code to the crank position sensor error, and hopefully it goes away. This is a little bit harder of an issue to fully diagnose that it's, or fully check that it's cleared and you fixed it, because sometimes, like I said earlier, the symptoms don't arise until the car is warmed up and hot. That's when the sensors go bad. Most likely we don't have a bum sensor, so I think we'll be good once everything gets cinched back down, but I'm going to drive the car around a little bit, get it up to temperature, and see how it performs, or at least let it sit for a while and get up to running temp. Just a fair warning, this little clip that goes around the MAF sensor housing is a real pain in the butt to get in. You have to just see these little 2 clips right in front of my finger here. You kind of have to squeeze it together, and then I use a screwdriver just to get the clip. You have to get this top piece over this bottom one, and I use a screwdriver just to get it enough, and then kind of, with one hand holding it together and then the other hand pushing the screwdriver on it to just get it to sit in. So now that's all back together. Alright, start it up. Get it up to temperature, and then we'll see if anything weird happens, because like I said earlier, a lot of the times issues with the crank position sensor won't actually occur until the car is hot and warmed up. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for this video on replacing the crankshaft position sensor in my C55 here. Now, it really applies to all Mercedes of this era, regardless of if it has the AMG V8 or not, V6 or V8. All the components around the engine, like the sensors and stuff, are pretty much the same as far as orientation goes. So if you have a C230 or whatever that's got the V6, it should be a similar setup to get the crankshaft position sensor out on your engine. So if you guys have any comments or questions about the process of replacing this guy or anything about the video today, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below and I'll be happy to answer them for you guys. I'm always happy to help you guys out with diagnosing your car trouble with your Mercedes and things like that. So thanks again guys for watching. If you haven't already, definitely subscribe for more and I will see you in the next one. Which is a crankshaft position